You're listening to Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the community for the best sales and marketing professionals in the aviation industry. You can't learn to fly just from a book. You learn from other pilots who know the tools, the skills, and the territory. Your hosts, John and Paula Williams, are your sales and marketing test pilots. They take the risks for you and share strategies, relevant examples, hacks, and how-tos. Be sure to subscribe on iTunes so you won't miss a thing.
Welcome to Aviation Hangar Flying, episode number 57. What can we learn about marketing from Donald Trump?
Seriously, episode 57? We have 57 of these things out there?
Yes, we do. Hard to believe, huh? So I'm Paula Williams.
I'm John Williams.
And we are ABCI, and ABCI's mission is
to help all you folks out there sell more products and services in the aviation world.
Absolutely. So you can always reply to in the comments section of our blog. You can also use the hashtag AvGeekMarketing if you'd like to comment on this or anything else that you hear or would like to hear. So let's talk about Donald Trump as a marketing case study, which I'm sure is everybody's favorite topic right now. If you haven't heard enough about Donald Trump, but he did actually do some things right, obviously, with marketing.
Yeah, he's one thing he knows is people and marketing.
That's true. So this is not going to be a political discussion.
Far from it.
John and I both voted for different people in this election. We canceled each other out. We'll let you guess who voted for who, but
not that it matters for this.
Exactly. This is about what was effective and what was not effective, not necessarily about good versus evil or any of those other things that we got into in the election. So from a marketing perspective, we noticed 3 points that John and I actually agreed on. We were talking about this yesterday at breakfast and decided that this actually deserves its own podcast, right, John?
Yeah, because people need to understand from a marketing perspective what the hell happened.
Right.
And why.
It was such a surprise to a lot of people, but in a lot of ways it wasn't to us. And there are 3 things that we think that Trump did right, and that
from a marketing perspective,
and that anybody can do right.
Yes.
From a marketing perspective. So the first one, pardon the pun, visibility trumps perfection.
Basically, yeah. You don't wait around till you have something perfect to get out there and market with. You do it when you think about it and you get most of it right, you get it out there.
Exactly.
He proved that.
Second thing is to create a common enemy, and we don't necessarily mean your opponent or your competitor, we mean an idea or a concept, right?
Yes.
And the third thing is fear versus desire as a motivating factor.
Which is different from the 60s, 70s. Fear wasn't much of a motivating factor, desire was.
Right, and we'll talk about how that's changed probably up to, I'm going to argue, the 90s, I think, but we'll get into the details of that momentarily.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
so first of all, visibility trumps perfection. Trump was mentioned positive, neutral, or negative a whole lot more than Clinton was. And their campaign actually made it a point to make sure that Donald Trump was mentioned in every single news cycle, right?
Yes. The thing was that he did it without paying for it, a lot of it.
Exactly. That's true, and you can do that too. But the opposite of that is what we see in a lot of aviation companies, where they will not let anything come out of their organization unless it is so polished and so perfect that they don't even do one press release per quarter or one advertisement per year. I mean, they are very, very polished and perfectionist and all of those other things. And I think that was part of Clinton's downfall, is that she did not do anything that she wasn't completely prepared for, completely polished, totally buttoned up, absolutely all I's dotted and all T's crossed.
And the absolute worst of the people in aviation for doing exactly what she said are the aviation-oriented attorneys. And Clinton has that background, which I think made her loath to do what Trump did.
Right, but what it did is it, number one, it kept her out of the news, which can be seen as a bad thing. But the second thing, I think nowadays people are looking for authenticity more than they're looking for polish and perfection. And in fact, polish and perfection can sometimes work against you.
Yeah, and authenticity, you may not like what you hear, but at least you hear it.
Right. That's absolutely true. So there are some caveats to this. Obviously, aviation decision makers are smarter than the public at large.
Absolutely.
And also, aviation is more risk averse than the public at large.
Absolutely, and both those points are necessary for aviation.
Right, that's absolutely true. So, is there really no such thing as bad press? With those caveats, we'd say darn skippy, right?
Yeah, with those caveats, because, and that's the thing in aviation, you have to balance, and because you're never going to get it perfect, even when you think you got it perfect. Mm-hmm. You'll get it out there and you say, oh crap, I spelled that word wrong, or left 2 words out. I mean, who knows, but it's not perfect, and and all you do by waiting is let the other guy get ahead of you.
Absolutely. And this doesn't mean that you shouldn't strive to make things as good as you possibly can, especially your marketing messages. You certainly should proofread, you certainly should edit, you certainly should polish, but only as much as it doesn't impact your schedule. For example, we put out one of these podcasts every week, and they are not scripted, they are not rehearsed. It's just us talking. Yeah,
and sometimes she'll look at me and say something, and I say, shrug my shoulder and said, you talk. Because I have not, it just doesn't hit me right.
Right, and sometimes the transcripts aren't released at exactly the right time, but we committed at the beginning of the year that we were going to release one podcast every week that was timely and relevant, not necessarily perfect. So it is more important that we publish every single Monday so that the people who make it a habit to tune in every Monday morning on their way to work, or whatever their habit is, we need to fit that schedule, and we need to match that expectation.
And hopefully give them something they didn't know.
Exactly. And, same thing. If your flight is not 100% on flight plan 100% of the time because of winds or whatever, you end up where you need to be by the time you need to be there. So, you shoot for perfection, and you put up with whatever the weather gives you, right?
Yeah.
So, what is it? It was actually in one of Stephen Covey's books that, most airliners are technically off course 80% of the time, but they do get where they're going in the time that they're supposed to be there.
Well, it's true with most airplanes, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is more important to get your newsletter out, or to get a quarterly press release out, or a monthly press release out, or to get your podcast out. Whatever it is that you do, make a regular schedule and meet that schedule with the best product you can, but it's more important to be on time than to be perfect. The second point is to create a common enemy. And this doesn't necessarily mean the competitor. So Trump's common enemy was not really Hillary, right? At least not at first. It was big government, it was government corruption, it was the swamp, it was, he called it a lot of things, but it was clearly a concept, not a person.
As a matter of fact, they were friends beforehand, and it wouldn't surprise me if he and she talked and he said, look, this is going to be nasty, I don't mean it personally, and then they went out and knocked heads.
Right, exactly. So the enemy in the Trump campaign that they framed as the enemy was big government, corruption, the rigged system. They called it a lot of things, but it basically boiled down to big government, right?
Yes.
Okay. Our common enemy is random acts of marketing. It is not any of our competitors, and it's not any particular person. It is a concept, and that concept is wasteful, random acts of marketing that don't work. because that is the thing that gives people a bad taste in their mouth about marketing, makes them feel horrible about marketing and sales, and that's the thing that we need to fight against in our company. That's our common enemy.
Yeah, you have to have a plan, and it has to have a lot of integrated pieces.
Right, exactly. So that's our common enemy. A charter company's common enemy could be airline hassles and delays, right? That's bad enough to be a common enemy. A lot of people really hate waiting in airports and being delayed and all of those things. And
that could be the TSA.
Yeah, that's true. Although I wouldn't
lost
baggage. Make
it
personal necessarily. I'd make it a concept, and that's airline hassles, which could include all of that stuff.
True.
Right? So anything that your customers are frustrated by can become a common enemy. And nothing unites people like a common enemy, right?
Been that way forever.
That's true. It could be apathetic customer service. Maybe that's one of the things that frustrates your customers about the other folks in your industry, and something that you do very differently is that you have actually helpful human beings answer the phone, So apathetic customer service could be your common enemy. Waste of time could be a common enemy if you're in a business that usually has a backup of several months or whatever to get something done. It could be something as specific as cold engine starts. Tannis Aircraft Heat Products, has a pretty good message where they talk about how cold engine starts cause all of these problems. Wear and tear on your engine, possibility of problems in flight later, higher maintenance costs, all kinds of things come from cold engine starts. So they've done a really good job of making that their common enemy. And, so that's a good one too. Whatever it is, whatever business you're in, there is something you could make a common enemy, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. So the third thing we talked about is fear versus desire as a motivating factor. So if you look at popular culture kind of up until the 90s, a common thread was kind of a hopeful optimism, the old Star Trek movies, all kinds of things like that. They looked at the future as a wonderful thing. And, people were expectant and hopeful and all of those things. And a lot of marketing messages were based on desire. I would really like to do this, and wouldn't this be great? And just imagine how cool this will be. And those kinds of messages, right, John?
Yes. In the 60s and 70s, even in the 80s, as far as I recall, people realized that all they had to do was work hard, and they could make something of themselves, and they could attain almost anything they wanted. Maybe not everything, but they could attain just about anything they wanted. And these days, I see the opposite. I don't see kids getting out of school and working their butts off to go do something.
Right, and this is not necessarily as things should be, but it's kind of as we see things.
Right.
And what is working in marketing versus what is not working in marketing. So whether we agree with it or not, a lot of the popular culture these days, you look at the TV series, you look at the movies, you look at other things, and they're all about the zombie apocalypse. Or scandal, or corruption, or games within games. The Game of Thrones kind of a dark scenario with not always good outcomes. In fact, a lot of the old TV shows and old movies always had a happy ending, no matter what happened in the course of that hour or half hour. They would always end well. And nowadays, that is not the case. We walked out of a lot of movies lately feeling like, oh, dang, that's not the way it was supposed to end. But that's kind of what's happened to our culture. And, like it or not, that's the culture that we live in, and the culture we're functioning in, and that our customers are functioning in. So let's talk about some fear versus desire kind of headlines. If we look at desire first, this is an old headline that would have been effective in the 90s. Learning to fly would be fun. What would be more effective today in a fear environment is don't let life pass you by without learning to fly. There's a more of an urgency to it. It's more likely to get people's attention in the overwhelm of advertising that's going on. And its fear can be more specifically and more urgently motivating, unfortunately, than desire.
Uh-huh.
Okay, here's another one. A trip to the Bahamas would be wonderful. That would be a great ad, with palm trees and drinks with umbrellas and, all of that imagery and everything else. A headline that's fear-based would be, your kids are growing up. You're missing an opportunity if you don't book this trip now. You're missing out. Fear of missing out. FOMO is a thing in marketing. We should buy this equipment because you want to operate the safest possible flight department. You want to be the best there is at what you do. That would be a desire-based headline. A fear-based headline would be, something terrible could happen if you don't buy the safety equipment now. Once again, more specific, more urgent, fear-based, right?
Yep.
Okay. Last one. Buy this business jet. Here's a list of the coolest features. And that's the way most marketing was done, I would say, up until about the 90s, is feature-based, look how cool this is, marketing, right? Now it's, you'll miss out on this opportunity if you don't buy this jet now, because the market is changing, the prices will be going up, or you need this feature because of a regulatory change or whatever. So you want to talk about fears, needs, other kinds of things like that, rather than desires. And this is kind of hard for those of us who grew up marketing or learned marketing 10 or 20 years ago when the theory was different, right?
But you have to morph with the times.
Yeah, and you have to follow the data. So, if the data suggests that these test better, which it does, and I think Trump is a really good
example.
Walking metaphor for a lot of these things. And anyway, so was there frustration in that? We don't have to like reality in order to function with it and use it to our advantage. So the 3 points, once again: visibility trumps perfection. Get your message out there on a frequent and regular basis.
You may, it doesn't matter whether you like him or like the fact that he won.
Mm-hmm.
The fact is, he did excellent marketing, and he did it so well it even shocked him.
Yeah, I think it did. Somebody said he looked like a man who'd been bluffing with a pair of twos and won the game,
And then he was so shocked he didn't know what to say.
Exactly. So once again, to kind of summarize our 3 points. 1, visibility trumps perfection. 2, create a common enemy. And 3, fear versus desire as a motivating factor, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, go sell more stuff.
Yep, Zig Ziglar said it well. America needs the business. Hysteria.
Exactly. So subscribe to our podcast in iTunes, Stitcher, or Google Play. And make sure you leave us a review. 5 stars would be nice, but if you feel differently, you can vote differently.
Yep.
And let us know what you'd like to hear more of or less of. And we will take it into consideration, right?
Absolutely.
All right, so have a great week.
Ciao.
Thanks for joining us for Aviation Marketing Hangar Flying, the best place to learn what really works in sales and marketing in the aviation industry. Remember to subscribe on iTunes and leave a rating.
You could.